In this video, we're listening to someone who called into my channel asking me to help him save his marriage because his wife is asking for a divorce after only 4 months of being married. So I'm going to respond back to his call and then talk about 4 lessons that we can glean from his situation.
Hey, Dr. Wyatt. So I'm fairly recently married. It's only been 4 months. My wife and I had a big blowout fight from unresolved stuff from just over the years of dating. She's already calling it and wants a divorce. And is receiving bad advice from family. So I guess my questions are how to not convince her not to get a divorce, but try to get therapy, and how to manage family and reason with a partner who's unwilling to distance themselves from family, especially when they're toxic or being toxic and putting fuel on the fire of divorce. Any advice would be helpful.
First of all, I really feel for you. If you're listening to this, I hope you are. What an awful situation. You're a newlywed, only married for 4 months, and your wife already wants a divorce. And so a couple of things I'd recommend. First thing, I would recommend talking to your wife once you both are de-flooded and asking her if she is willing to work with someone to help you both work through your resentments. As you mentioned, there's unresolved resentments because of the years you've been together. Even though you're newlyweds, you were dating for a few years, and there's unresolved issues. And when we have unresolved issues, couples start having problems. So the top thing I would recommend to you is ask your wife if she is willing to work with a professional to sit down to help you and her together work through those resentments one at a time, so that you don't have these big blow-ups anymore, so that she feels more hopeful staying together. The second thing I'd recommend is discussing with her what are some agreements, some compromises we can have with who we're going to talk to our marriage about and who we're not. Obviously, it's going to be risky if you share your marital problems with certain people in your life. However, you need people you can share your problems with, because one of the worst things we can do when we're struggling in marriage is talk to people in our lives who are pro-divorce, because that's going to send us in the wrong direction. So I also would do that and see if she's open to compromising with you and creating that agreement. The next thing I would recommend is ask her what are the top changes she wants to see in you. If she's the one threatening divorce, there's probably some behaviors you're having that she is not happy with. Now, obviously, this does not mean that she also does not have growth areas. I'm sure she does. But considering she is the one that's waffling with commitment, the first step you're going to have to do is cater to what changes she needs to see. She probably needs to feel hope. She probably needs to feel like you are making those adjustments and that you're taking her concerns seriously. So I would ask her for a list. What are the top things, the top behaviors you need to see changed in me? And then double down and put all your effort into making those changes. Because if she sees those changes being made over time, most likely that's going to give her hope, and that's going to make her reconsider her commitment to the marriage. Now I'm going to go into 4 lessons we all can glean from this phone call. The first one is the risk of unresolved resentments. This is why I talk about unresolved resentments so much, because when you have them, which almost every couple does, this is the result. You have fights, you have conflict, you have walls, you have problems. It all goes back to unresolved resentments. And what is an unresolved resentment? It's when you have negative feelings in your heart toward your partner that's unresolved. An analogy to think about with resentments is a river. So if you want the water to flow stronger right in front of you, and water represents love, what do you have to do? You have to hike upstream and remove the debris in the river. Sometimes you have to hike upstream a couple feet, sometimes a couple hundred feet, sometimes maybe a mile. It doesn't matter how far back the resentment goes. You have to go back and resolve those resentments so that the water currently that's flowing gets stronger. So the takeaway here is you need to go home tonight and ask your spouse, what resentments do you have toward me? And then ask them, what changes do I need to make to resolve those resentments and help you feel hope in this relationship? And then make those changes. That's really the key. Resolving resentments requires being able to talk through them, but even more so, it requires making changes. The more your spouse sees you making changes on the areas they have resentments on, that resentment will slowly dissolve. So if you want to save your marriage, one of the key things you need to do is actively resolve your resentments. It's an ongoing maintenance item. When you're living with someone long term, you have to continually keep an eye on those resentments. The second lesson is do not threaten divorce in an argument. I hear it all the time. Couples have a conflict, they're arguing, they're angry, they're flooded, and then before long, at least one partner starts threatening divorce. They start saying things like, I'm done with this marriage, or I'm out of this marriage, or I want a divorce. They say these very hurtful, threatening things. It doesn't mean that eventually some couples calmly decide to get a divorce. But what you don't want to do is threaten it when you're heated, and threaten it when you're flooded, and threaten it in the middle of an argument. Because when you do that, you're using it as a weapon. And the more you threaten divorce, the more that's going to create insecurity in your relationship. Your partner's not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel secure. They're going to pull back because they feel insecure. So they're going to start shutting down toward you emotionally and physically. So have a ground rule in your relationship that we are not going to threaten divorce when we get upset. It undermines the foundation of our relationship. The third lesson to glean from this phone call is the contract versus the covenant mindset in marriage. The contract says, I'm married to you as long as I'm happy, as long as my needs are met, as long as I'm fulfilled, I'm married to you and I'm committed. But the moment I'm not happy, the moment my needs are not being met, divorce becomes a viable option. That's the contract approach. And most people approach marriage in that manner. And you know they do because when you ask them, why are you getting a divorce? They'll tell you those reasons. I'm just not happy, or I just don't love him anymore, or my needs aren't being met. Now, don't get me wrong. It's important to feel happy. It's important to feel in love. It's important to have your needs met. However, if your commitment is entirely based on your feelings, it's risky because feelings are going to ebb and flow. The second approach to marriage is the covenant approach. And this approach says, we're in this for the long haul. And I know we're going to have seasons where our needs aren't being met, seasons where we may not feel in love, seasons where we may not be happy. But when those seasons hit, that's when we're going to dig in deeper and work harder to get out of that hole, to get out of winter and move into spring. So unless there's adultery, unless there's abuse, unless there's abandonment, we're not giving up. We're going to dig in and work harder to get out of that negative winter season and into spring. That's the covenant approach. So I highly recommend anyone who's listening to this adapt the covenant mindset. Unless there's adultery, abuse, or abandonment, hang in there. As long as your partner is still willing to work at the marriage, you need to keep working at the marriage and not give up. If you want help to get you out of winter, to get you into spring, consider enrolling into my ER Marriage Intensive. It's going to show you how to resolve your resentments and rekindle your love. You can schedule a free consultation with one of my coaches. The link is in the description. The fourth lesson we can glean from this phone call is be careful who you turn to when you're struggling in your marriage. A lot of people don't feel comfortable turning to their family or friends because when you start venting to your family and friends, you may turn some of them against your partner because you're going to be telling them what you're struggling with. You're going to be telling them what you think your partner is doing wrong. So it's going to taint how they feel toward your partner. So some people don't share their marital problems with anybody. Now that's also a problem because now you're isolated. Now you have no one to talk to. Now you're all alone. And you also don't want that. And so the balance is trying to pick a few people in your life that you feel safe with that are also pro-marriage and that your partner would feel comfortable with you also venting to those people. I encourage each partner to have at least one person in your life that you can vent to about your marriage. And you choose this person because you know they're pro-marriage. So when you're venting about your marriage, you know you're going to get good advice. You know they're going to encourage you to hang in there. You know they're going to encourage you to look at your contribution. How are you making things worse? So we need support. You do not want to feel alone in your marriage. However, you need to be careful and thoughtful with who you're opening up to. And ideally, you and your spouse would get on the same page with who those people can be in both of your lives so that you each have some support. Because if you're not mindful with who you turn to, you're going to get a lot of bad advice. You're going to get a lot of people encouraging you to leave. You're going to get a lot of people encouraging you to get a divorce. And you don't need that kind of feedback when you're struggling. You need someone to encourage you to keep fighting, to keep working at it, to dig in, to get out of winter and go into spring. So avoid the extremes of opening up to anybody and everybody, regardless of their value system, but also avoid the extreme of opening up to nobody. There's a balance in between. So those are 4 lessons we can glean from this phone call. Number 1, the risk of unresolved resentments. You have to heal them. Number 2, Don't threaten divorce in the middle of a conflict. Number 3, remember the contract versus the covenant mindset with marriage. And number 4, careful who you turn to with your marital problems. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave your questions in the comments. And if you'd like to learn more about my ER Marriage Intensive to see if it'd be a good match for you and your partner to resolve your resentments and rekindle your love, comment book a call below to set up a free consultation with a member of my team. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to watch this one next.